Homeowners of Reddit, what are the most insane HOA rules you have had to deal with? My parents' HOA has a rule that you are not allowed to cut down trees without a permit from them, at any time, for any reason. The first winter they lived there was an ice storm and a tree fell onto the neighbor's deck, taking out his entire deck and the sliding glass door that went from his kitchen to his deck. My dad went over with his chainsaw to help him cut down the tree that was now in his kitchen. And, mid-storm, someone from the association heard the chainsaw and came over asking if they had a permit to cut apart the tree in my neighbor's kitchen. If I recall correctly, he told them to get bent and they tried to give him a $1,000 fine for cutting down a tree without a permit. We can only have 3 types of flags on a flagpole. That is to be approved: out front, an American flag, a military flag, or a South Carolina flag. One of our neighbors were warned a couple times until they took their cutesy frog flag down. Time to convince someone's unit to adopt a frog flag. I used to live in a HOA. One of the members on the board lived across the street from my neighbor and I. He sent a letter to us saying that we all have to mow the lawn on the same day, at the same cut height, and in the same pattern to create uniformity in the neighborhood. My neighbor and I intentionally cut on different days and in opposite patterns just to annoy the guy. You should have cut on the same day as him, but so that you and your friend's pattern matched and the HOA guys was wrong. Then report him for not being uniform. I had a HOA try to enforce that I had much too old of a car to be in the driveway. Mind you, no rust, always clean, never dusty dirty. Went to court and the judge ordered a full audit of the HOA. It was not enforceable at all. They paid my legal fees and last I knew they have yet to police anything. I used cool white LED Christmas lights instead of warm white. There was no specifics given in the HOA handbook. After that year it was placed in there. I work at Target. My first Christmas on the sales floor. My boss told me guests are gonna be all about light because of local HOA rules. And sure enough, we got call and people every day asking for lights specifying light temp and wire color. I was once warned about storing my trash in view of the street. I thought to myself, that's funny, I'm pretty on top of the trash. So I checked the date of the infraction. Sure enough, it was trash day. They were upset at me about putting my trash out on trash day. Probably put it out too early. I know some places have a rule about that. I can't fathom why anyone would buy into a HOA or condo. You're buying property and still letting other people tell you what you can do with it. Well, currently they are trying to go after me for bushes in my front yard, saying you can't have a fence in your front yard and you must remove the bushes. There's a lady with an actual picket fence in her front yard that is allowed to keep it, but my bushes that were planted by the previous owner about 10 years ago or more have to be removed. Oh, also they put a lien on someone's house for having a boat in the driveway. Meanwhile someone on the board has had a pop-up camper in their driveway for months. Not even a single notice was given. You can probably argue that the bushes have exceeded the time limit for the board to disagree with them. I know we're only allowed to go back 4 years. You might be able to use Google Maps or Bing to prove the dates the bushes were there. The way you get away with having the pop-up camper in the driveway is by knowing when the inspections are. In order to sell or rent in my HOA, you must provide HOA docs to the new owner or tenant. They must be bought from the HOA, otherwise the sale rental is not legal. $200 for a 3-ring binder with 150 pages of poorly photocopied documents. The first page. These documents have not been updated since July 2002. Please see the HOA website for updated documents. Pretty sure a HOA can't restrict you selling your home. Didn't happen to me, but my friend's family got fined for leaving open the garage while they were mowing. Same family also got fined for having a graduation sign in their yard. My friend's HOA fined him because the flagpole that was already up in his front yard when he purchased the house was too tall. He counted by flying a pirate flag on that flagpole. They are even less happy with the flagpole now. My friend bought a house and they threatened him with a $150 fine for not mowing his yard after 3 days of living there. He said he'd be happy to mow it at 3 AM when he gets off work, or they can wait until his next day off and he won't wake up the whole neighborhood. They quietly went away, LOL. My townhome neighborhood has an HOA that covers the exterior of our homes, since they all share the same exterior. being connected and whatnot. My front door has developed a rotting spot on the edge, so I sent a claim in for the hoe to replace it. They said the front door does not fall within their definition of the exterior of the home. That's fine. Whatever. I'll just buy a new one. But wait, I have to fill out an exterior change request to get a new front door. The door they said doesn't count as exterior. Needs an exterior change request sent to approve any external changes made. They want to control what my door looks like, but I have to pay for it. Get a crazy looking door to spite them. Better yet, submit a crazy looking door, and when they shoot you down, point out that your door is either exterior or it isn't. They can't have it both ways. I lived in a fairly large family-friendly townhouse community. There was a community baseball field. At least it was set up like a baseball field with the fences and backstop, but essentially it was just a giant field. Further down was a playground and fenced-in tennis court. It was meant to be used. There were dozens of kids playing baseball, football, soccer, or whatever on it all the time. For really no reason they decided to shut it down. Overnight they put up signs to not use it and keep out. If your kids dared to even walk across it, police would be called in minutes. We were playing tennis on the courts one day and police were called. The next day it was locked up with a chain and combination lock. We called the hoe and were told we would have to give them proof we actually played tennis to be given the combination. My parents and a lot of other parents got in long arguments on the phone and at the hoe meetings about why they made these ridiculous new rules. They were essentially told because we can. It became a war in the community against the old ladies that ran the hoe and the younger families with kids. Kids are going to play somewhere. Surely it's better on fields designed for it and a little away from houses than all over the place. I was threatened with an $85 fine because they claimed my tree was shading the sidewalk by 2 inches. It was such an odd complaint. I just wondered what kind of person was involved with that report. Limited number of pets. Didn't matter what they were. 2 animals on the property maximum. I've seen that in rentals but never before in a community of homeowners. Our hoe enforcer aka bully likes to go around with his cell phone and take random pictures of people's property. If anyone's front yard isn't as good looking as his, then he would send notices. My wife was out there in the spring making the front look nice when she saw the bully walk by and take a picture and walk off. She finished and the front yard was nice looking with flowers and stuff. The next day we get a notice stuck to our door stating that we need to redo our entire front yard with what my wife just did. 2 years ago I was cleaning the living room and I moved the couches around and let one of the dogs outside while I was working. The back gate was shut. Somehow during the time I was working in the living room, the hoe guy came by and yanked the gate open and the dog got out. Didn't notice this until I was done and my dog was gone. I had to search the area quickly because I had to go to work in an hour. Luckily she didn't go very far. When beagles get that scent lock they go after it. How did I know it was him? Got a notice the next day to secure my backyard gate. My neighbor has an open fence area since she has an end unit. She reported that she would be playing with the kids and the hoe would walk by trying to be sneaky taking pictures with his phone. Visitor parking is rarely enforced. When they do enforce it they tow, yet there are times I see work trucks in Vista spots overnight. I always get my parking pass and my hoe board and put the tag up for my guests, yet when I come back from a late night movie and I see cars parked in visitors spots with no tags I am like WTF dude. But to be honest, I have been here for nearly 10 years and they can't do anything to us legally. This was in an apartment complex, but it was still insane. The place I lived in had a 3-strike rule, and the strikes could be for petty crap. I once got a strike for having a blackout curtain that was slightly visible behind the standard shades that were provided, and I had beach towels hanging on a balcony to dry. They weren't there for more than 10 minutes before I got a notice on my door. All this while my neighbor next door had loud parties every night. Nothing happened. And the last straw was when that same neighbor left a puke-soaked blanket hanging off his balcony for a week straight, and nothing happened. Frick you Loma Palisades. Not me, but my girlfriend's parents' hoe is absurd. The other day they didn't put the trash cans back behind the fence by the early afternoon on trash day. They both work full time and were threatened with a fine. My girlfriend's dad was bedridden for 4 months and they wrote him about once a week complaining that their fence needed repainting even though they knew he was sick. Same thing with not cutting the lawn after 2 weeks during this time. The hoa wrote a formal complaint when they had people over one Sunday afternoon because it was disruptive of potential Sunday afternoon naps. Yeah, frick those guys. Disruptive of potential Sunday afternoon naps. Holy frick, that's rich. Apartment hoa. The wheels got stolen off my car. Couldn't get it towed that night because no places were open. The next morning I'm coordinating calls between the body shop and my insurance when I look out my window and see my car wasn't there. Some butthole hoa property manager had my car towed because it was a danger to the surrounding cars. Luckily my insurance company covered the towing fees. It was a danger to the surrounding cars. Cars without wheels are like rotting fruit. One bad car in the lot. Next thing you know the wheels are falling off all the others. There was a lake where my mom used to live, and people started feeding the ducks. After a while a lot more were showing up and people started complaining. Instead of just removing them, the hoa killed all of them. I don't think the hoa has the right to kill people just because they're feeding ducks. I don't have a hoa but my brother does. He lives in Florida. During a hurricane he barricaded his windows. After the hurricane there isn't much damage to the neighborhood. The hoa mandated to the barricades removed 1 day after the hurricane. Jesus. Welp. Gotta protect those property values. Lot of prospective buyers driving around 2 days after a hurricane. My buddy is an attorney who represents homeowners in disputes with their hoas. He has a case right now where the hoa is coming after the homeowners for living in their homes instead of renting it out. Put the house in spouse 1's name. Have spouse 2 rent it. Have a lavish rent payment ceremony on the front lawn every month, complete with tribal drummers. Had a basketball hoop above my driveway. Received a letter to remove it. The letter said that since it was a second notice, I would receive a fine of $50. I never received the first notice. When I called to complain I was told to send an email to their billing department. Sent the email and never heard anything back. When I was growing we lived in a neighborhood with a batshit insane hoa. We had a trampoline with no cover on the springs, so we got a notice saying we needed to buy a cover. No problem. We bought a standard blue cover the next day. No biggie. The following day we got a notice with a $200 fine that our trampoline pad didn't match the trim on our house and we, therefore, had 2 days to remove and replace it. We also regularly got complaints for playing in the street of a very suburban neighborhood with almost zero traffic. We were ages 10-15. Received a fine for our basketball hoops net being too tattered. It wasn't. And countless others. My mom made it her mission to troll the hoa as much as possible. Eventually the old neighbors across the street both died and the complaints notices instantly stopped coming. Rotten heck. Dave and Kathy. That net is so tattered it has holes in it. My friend and co-worker showed me the Facebook page to her hoa. They make daily posts that residents can't park in their driveways because it ruins the aesthetic of the neighborhood. The posts contain threats of tickets and possible towing. She paid $350,000 for a townhouse and can't park in her garage because she drives a truck and it won't fit. Ruins the aesthetic of the neighborhood. Freaking stupid that is. I'd be weirded out if I drove through a neighborhood and there was not one car in a driveway. Grass had to be exactly a specific inch height. Only white colored Christmas lights made of white wiring, not stereotypical green. Snow and driveway and sidewalk leading to house had to be shoveled by X width and cleared off by Y time of the day. I rented a house in a hoa neighborhood. We were threatened with a fine for using black trash bags instead of white ones. Except we also had trash containers we put our bags in, so someone literally opened our containers to check our bag color. People who run hoas have way too much time on their hands. They are called old retired people. Our condo hoa sent a notice that we are not allowed to have our cat on our own patio, on a harness, under our own supervision. Someone complained he had eaten the grass that lines the patio. My stepson lives in San Antonio and his HVAC went out in the middle of August. With 2 kids in the house and 100 degrees out, he got desperate and put a window unit in temporarily until the repair folks could get there. Hoa sent a fine since he didn't request written approval in advance for the window unit. Got some nastograms because my grass was too tall. I hadn't cut it in 2 weeks due to being gone on a trip and poor weather. Okay, not a big deal, so I cut my grass. A week later get dinged for having grass that was too tall. Now I'm confused. How much shorter do you want my grass? Contacted the hoer and asked what was going on, and they said my grass was over 2 feet tall. There is green space beside my property that belongs to the hoer that they had neglected to cut since I moved in. Turns out it was their own problem in the first place. TLDR. Got dinged by the hoer because they didn't cut their own grass. My parents' house when I was fairly little, they owned it from when I was 4 to about 13, was hoer. They eventually wanted to paint the house because it had been built in the 1950s and probably hadn't been painted since then. They'd originally wanted to paint it a very reasonable shade of blue or red for a house, not an eyesore by any means. Hoer refused to approve it. Instead, my parents got to use the most horrendous shade of green known to man. That color was an abomination. We lived at the end of the street and we had bushes next to our driveway in front of the path leading to the backyards between the homes. We wanted to remove them or trim them because they were super annoying. We were told they are not our property and we can't touch them. A particularly windy day coincided with garbage pickup day and all the garbage from people's bins blew down the street and got caught in the bush. It was an unappealing sight. The hoer tried to tell us that we had to clean it up. They are not our property and it's not our responsibility to clean it up. They removed those bushes a couple weeks later. Living in SoCal at the height of the drought, there's water restrictions in effect, placed on residents by the state of California, such as 1. Can only water your lawn on certain days and times of night, usually post 6 p.m. 2. Can't wash your car in the driveway. 3. Not allowed to refill any lost water in a pool, and some others like that. Parents took care of the grass by watering what little they were allowed to, but it wasn't a lush bright green color anymore. Hoer tried imposing a fine of $125 for dead grass and that it was an eyesore. I happened to be the one home that day when my mom was approached with this letter at the door. Told the woman there that she was being more of an eyesore to the property than the grass was. Also sent her the proper info from the state that put the water restrictions in place. Her reply was that she didn't care and wanted everything to look nice and proper. I offered to start watering midday to get a bright green lawn only if she was willing to cover any fine imposed by the state. Never saw her again. I've been lucky because for the most part, the 2 hoers I've lived under have been great. But remember one incident when we used to live in a high-rise. The day after our wedding, we returned home with a car full of gifts, wife's dress, etc. And because we had been so busy saying goodbye to guests at the hotel, never had a chance to eat all day. So we parked our car in the circle outside the lobby and decided to eat sandwiches we'd picked up on the way home at a round table in the lobby before unloading the car. This table was size height of a dining table. 4 chairs like a dining table. Almost never saw it getting used, other than maybe when somebody was meeting with a real estate agent to put together a purchase offer. Some old biddy from the board comes up to us in a huff. "You're not allowed to eat at this table." Verified with the doorman, who concurred that was the hoer policy. So we ate our sandwiches off the trunk of our car in the front circle, 20 feet from a perfectly fine table. Growing up, I lived in a gated community with a swimming pool, and one of the pool rules was that house help were not allowed to swim in it. When I was a kid I didn't really care, but now looking back it was a totally senseless and elitist rule. Why shouldn't the help use the swimming pool if they aren't even causing a scene or harming anyone or breaking any of the other sensible pool rules? They are trying to enforce the rule of you can't smoke marijuana on the property, which is fine, except that Canada just legalized marijuana, so they are trying to ban a legal substance, and it doesn't matter if people are smoking medicinally or not, because reefer is bad. I think it's the same as smoking though, so if there was no rule about smoking before, and they change it, it wouldn't apply retroactively to any owners before the policy was changed. I guess it would be a gray area since technically it was implied no marijuana use before it became legal. I am not sure how that would play out. Not me but my parents. They moved into a new subdivision with 2 dogs. Less than 2 months after they moved in they had a fence built in the backyard. Around 5 months after they moved in a hoer was formed. The Hoa attempted to fine my parents for building a fence without getting a permit from the Hoa. They fought the fine and eventually didn't have to pay it, but it took 2 months of fighting them until the Hoa understood that the fence was built before the Hoa was even formed. Copy and paste from a fuck Hoa post I made a while back. The story of how my Hoa gave me a childhood head injury and killed my cat. A little late, but there were these lampposts all over town along the sidewalks about 6 feet high, and to replace the light bulb you had to take a pointy top off with a screw and a nut. Well, my Hoa thought that was too much time, so they used wire. So when I was about 3 I was playing outside and for one reason or another, which I cannot remember, the top fell off onto my head. I had to get 8 sticks. They said publicly that my parents were terrible parents for letting me out of their sight and it wasn't their fault. They were getting dressed up for a party or a reunion or something. But I remember it was less than 10 minutes, so it was obviously not their fault. Another example was when they said cats had to be on leashes, and it was county law. For reference, there was a lot of middle-aged dog owners who never had kids, so they were jealous that cats could roam free, but dogs couldn't. So they spread the information that if you see a cat without a leash, call animal control, which my dad tried to combat on a local forum but ended up being an uphill battle. Well, one day, my cat wanted to go outside, as most cats do. So a college-aged dog of someone 2 doors down picked up my cat, who was comfortable around humans, and gave her water, which she drank. Now she was given leftover tuna, and cats drink more water to help them digest it. Now this was enough evidence that my cat was a stray and called animal control. We didn't know, and she ended up going without her medicine for about a week, which forced us to put her down. So at 9 years old, I was already fully aware that Hoa sucked. Frick Fillington. The city trimmed down a hedge by the side of my house so they could get at an electrical box. My Hoa is trying to fine me for not having a hedge that will hide the electrical box. Not me, but my parents. They live in a private neighborhood and their house is within walking distance of the ocean. But the requirements of their Hoa, despite this being a beach community, you are not allowed to have a boat visible in your yard because it ruins the aesthetics. Again, in a beach community, and if you do have a boat, it has to be hidden in some way and cannot be seen from the street. When I was a kid, we had a 13-foot Boston Whaler, which my dad kept behind the house, but a couple inches of the trailer head could be seen from the street. My parents were asked to put up a fence to hide the few inches of the trailer, and if they did not, their boat would be towed. I worked for my stepdad's painting company when I was in high school. Dealing with Hoas was a constant. We'd be in the middle of a job, and some representative of the Hoa in whatever neighborhood we were in would come over and start bugging us about the colors or something stupid like that. We even had one guy complain that there were too many people on our crew, including myself. There were 4 people on the crew, which is pretty standard for a paint crew, especially considering that we were painting multi-million-dollar houses that were huge. This was 10 years ago, but I have never been able to figure out why 4 people was considered too many. I received a threatening letter to remove my pink flamingo from my lawn because it was an eyesore. The Hoa president had political signs on her lawn, so I asked how that's any different. She said if she had to explain then I probably wouldn't understand. No outdoor parties, and no disparaging remarks about the Hoa board or their decisions. The first one, we just ignored that rule. My lawyer assured me that it was unenforceable and to refuse to pay any fines levied. And the second, since this was a First Amendment case, I went to the board meetings and chewed their butt for 5 solid minutes. It won me no favors, but I just dared them to try to censor me. They fined me $1,200 over a period of several years. Who knows what it's up to with penalties and interest. This was almost 20 years ago in Dallas. No disparaging remarks about the Hoa board or their decisions. Holy crap. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.